Good evening. Hi, everybody. We're going to get started. Thank you so much for joining us. We have some people joining us in person and some people joining us out in virtual land, and we're very happy to have all of you with us this evening. We also have this being recorded, so if people miss the meeting, there are lots of things going on. You can always watch the recording later. So I am going to kick us off. I am the superintendent, Julie Hackett, and I'm really proud to be here this evening. I'm going to share a little bit about our plans around the new and renovated high school, not the plans, but how we got here. And this is the first of many opportunities for you to provide public input on our high school construction project. And we're so thankful that you're able to join us tonight. So we're going to start with a list of the school building committee members. I am going to call off the names of those of us who are helping with the project. Save your applause to the end if you would. And school building committee members, there's going to be tons of applause. I can feel it. School building committee members, just stand when I call your name, if you would, please. And if you are a school building committee member who is out in virtual land, you can raise your hand or acknowledge yourself on the computer, if you'd like. And let's see, I'm on the school building committee along with Mr. Malloy, the town manager, Joe Pato, Kathleen Lenahan, Michael Cronin, Mark Barrett, Jonathan Himmel, Charles Favazzo, Andrew Baker, Carolyn Kosnoff, Shing-Min Shah, Charles Lamb, Alan Levine, Dan Voss, and Ksenia Slavsky. Now you can give them a round of applause. Thank you so much. So as I said, I'm going to talk to you about how we got here, and how we got here depends largely on the efforts of a really incredible group in the community, and that's the school committee. So I'll tell you about that in a moment, but I want to acknowledge them as well. So school committee members who I see here are Eileen J., Larry Freeman, Deepika Sawhney. Please stand. Round of applause. And Kathleen Lenahan and Sarah Cuthbertson may be on virtual. Kathleen had a conflict, but they are definitely here with us in spirit. So thank you to all of them. After I get done talking about the history, I'm going to turn it over to Doran Whittier, who are our owners, project managers. We're really fortunate to be able to work with them. And then towards the end of the presentation, I'll introduce you to some terrific middle and high school students who are here with us this evening and with whom I've had the pleasure of working recently. They are just fabulous young people. They're going to share their perspectives on Lexington High School and lead us in a fun activity that some of you may actually remember. We used it back in 2018 when we developed our strategic plan and enlisted the community in that effort. And you might recall the words joy in learning, curiosity in life, compassion in all we do, things like we all belong, you are enough. That all came from you, the community, and was put into the strategic plan with the process that our students will share with you this evening. I'm the proud superintendent of Lexington Public Schools, and this is my 6th year in the district. And in Lexington, we have a strong belief that alone we can do so little, and together we can do so much, in the words of Helen Keller. In 2018, the Master Planning Committee had been formed, but the work had not yet begun. One of the final tasks, or final, one of the, I hope it's not the final, one of the first tasks assigned to me by the school committee was to begin the work with the Master Planning Committee. And they wanted the Master Planning Committee to engage representatives from municipal government, from elected boards, and from various school community members. So we had members of the Appropriation Committee, Capital Expenditure Committee, Sustainability, Planning Board, and so on. And we started to work on a master plan. We rolled up our sleeves, developed the master plan, and at the time that we were doing this, our elementary school enrollments were increasing, and the school committee wanted to be sure that we were assessing the needs in the district in terms of what our school buildings needed, enrollment shifts, and planning for future educational needs. And thanks to the amazing efforts of the MPC, some of whom I know are here with us this evening, we were able to produce 2 master planning documents in the span of about 1.5 years, notwithstanding a little pandemic that was thrown in for good measure. So we now have 2 official documents, One is the LPS master plan, and the second is the LPS master planning compendium to guide our capital planning efforts. Our master plan, the traditional one, has all the traditional elements that one might expect to find in a capital plan, things like enrollment projections, square footage in our schools, space utilization, planned operating capacity, and so on. The LPS master planning compendium is a little different and something that is uniquely Lexington. It's a flexible, responsive, complex, yet useful plan that accounts for unknown variables. So it was really a cool exercise that we went through together to figure this out. It's organized by grade span, elementary, middle, and high school, and it tells us what we should consider if enrollments are as anticipated, lower than expected, or higher than expected. So if you think about how to develop a plan and you think about those categories, and the overlay is the grade spans, it was a pretty complex exercise. We definitely used our critical thinking skills, and we produced something that I think is very respectable. After many master planning meetings, lots of data analysis, and several creative problem-solving sessions, the MPC strongly endorsed engaging in a district-wide redistricting effort for elementary schools, which we did. That was hard, but we made it through. And then they endorsed a plan to pursue a new or renovated project at the high school level, and that's written into our master planning documents. In the next 3 years, after we got these documents up and running, we submitted something called a statement of interest to the Massachusetts School Building Authority. A statement of interest is more or less a grant application that school systems write to ask for partnership and funding through the MSBA. The first year, we didn't get it. The second year, we didn't get it. The third year, we got the good news that we were invited to partner with the MSBA after we went through some hurdles. And some school systems, just so you know how this works, some school systems wait up to a decade for consideration. And it's not about what you do that's fancy. It's not about fancy footwork in a plan, though they should be well thought out, of course. It's more about need, and thankfully the MSBA agreed that there was significant need in the community, and they're willing to partner with us, and we're really grateful for that. So here we are, and this is a very exciting rollout for us because we have that partnership in the MSBA. We still have tons of work ahead of us, to be clear. What I'm most excited about is our work together in partnership and collaboration, because when we come together as a community, we produce really great, amazing things. And this work that we're doing tonight, this work that started many years ago with the Master Planning Committee, is all going to leave a really incredible legacy for our students and families for years to come, and you're all part of it. So thanks so much for being here. And with that, I will turn it over to our OPM.
Good evening, everybody. Is that volume okay? Okay. Yes, as Julie said, we're an OPM, that's an owner's project manager, and I'm going to explain a little bit about what that means in a minute. But first, I want to have my team introduce themselves. So starting with me, I'm Mike Burton, and I'll be your project director.
Good evening, Steve Brown, Senior Project Manager.
Christina Dell'Angelo, Project Manager. And we have with us remote this evening, Michael Cox, who is also Project Manager, and Rachel Rincon, Assistant Project Manager.
Also with us is Aiden Place, Assistant Project Manager.
And I'm Jason Boone. I'm an Educational Facility Planner with Doran Whittier. My role this evening is about a software platform that we're going to use to gather information from you and the students. If you have your phones on you, you can point them at this QR code and enter the platform. We'll give you just a moment to do that. If you can't scan the QR code with your phone, you can go to menti.com and enter the code there, 22067481. And I see lots of likes coming in as folks are joining. That's terrific. I'll give a little more instruction about this in just a minute. I want to make sure everybody got connected, and we'll have Mike do the agenda for the rest of the meeting.
And Jason, folks joining us virtually can also join that link, correct?
They absolutely can, yes, correct.
Excellent. Okay, so what are we going to be talking about tonight? Now that we've completed our introductions and gone through Menti, Tonight, we're going to talk to you a little bit about the project specific. Hello? Oh, yep, no problem. Anybody still having trouble getting in? Excellent. All right, if we could go to the agenda, please. Yes, so we're going to talk a little bit about the website tonight. We're going to talk about the project team. We're going to talk to you about the Massachusetts School Building Authority and a little bit about them and their process. We're going to talk some initial thoughts on timeline for the project. We're going to talk about design and procurement. We're currently getting the architect on board, and we'll explain more about that. We're going to talk about upcoming meetings, and then the part that we're all very excited about is the KLDI that Julie mentioned, and that's going to be performed by some students here. So we're looking forward to that. And then we will conclude with a question and answer period for anybody who's either remote or in person that has any questions. So with that,
we'll put this up on the screen just one more time. This is a collaboration platform, and as Dr. Hackett had mentioned, the bulk of this evening's meeting is about gathering some early input from you and the rest of the community. It should show every slide that we're going to put up on the screen tonight on your device, and you should follow along. But when we pose questions to you and ask you for feedback, if you don't get finished before we advance to the next slide, let us know. But if your screen disappears or changes, you haven't been disconnected from the platform. It's just that the presentation has moved on to the next activity. We want to test the Menti platform with this opening question. Simple prompt. What is it that you think you know about the project so far on a scale from 1 to 5? If you don't feel like you know very much, right? 1 is on that side of the scale. And if you feel like you already know a lot, 5 is on the other side of the scale. And what's happening is you're seeing results of everybody who's providing input show up sort of in real time. So it looks like on average, folks know somewhere around the left-hand side of the scale, around a 2.2. That gives you some sense of how this platform will work.
is the activity slowing down for the online folks? Yep. Okay. Yeah, so we just wanted to direct people's attention to the Lexington High School website. It's lhsproject.lexingtonma.org. For people who want to be informed and kept up to date, this is the website to go to. You can get links to it from both the town and the school's website. On here, we keep MSBA correspondence, SBC meeting minutes, videos, agendas, presentations, and so forth. So we are constantly updating it. Aiden updates it at least once a week. And so it's a sort of a live tool. And so those people that want to stay informed about the project, we think it's a very valuable resource. There's also an opportunity for folks to ask questions. We're here because we want input. We want thoughts, concerns, questions. And so there's a contact us tab on the website. We encourage anybody to use it. It goes right to us in the superintendent's office, and we'll try to get prompt responses. So some of you may be asking, what is an owner's project manager? You're probably going to hear me say OPM a lot. I talk in a lot of acronyms. In Massachusetts, per law, a city or town doing any construction project over $1.5 million is required to hire the services of an OPM to take on project management responsibilities. So basically, we're going to work with the Department of Public Facilities, the School Building Committee, the multiple committees here. We're here to be an extension of Lexington. We're here to be an advocate for Lexington and make sure that the goals of the SBC and all these committees is being met. And ultimately, that's what we're here to do. So how did we get here? A RFS, or request for services, was issued for OPMs. That was back in March, and several OPMs submitted. They were shortlisted. Interviews were held in May, and fortunately, we were selected as the preferred OPM. A little bit about Doran Whittier. We focus on Massachusetts public schools. That's the core of our business. We do this both on the owner's project manager and architectural side. I have had the opportunity to work with Lexington in the past. We were the owner's project manager for the Mariah Hastings Elementary School, which just recently received LEED Gold, which we're very proud about. And we're currently working next door at the police station. So if anybody would like any more information, our website's at the bottom, doranwhittier.com. So what does the project team look like? Initially, during the design phase, there's 3 key players. There's the town of Lexington, the OPM, and eventually there will be a designer. As we proceed through the design process, there's going to be a 4th leg to that stool, who's going to be the builder. So in the next slide, you'll see what represents the builder. There's 2 different procurement methods we can go. So it could be a construction manager or a general contractor, but that'll be a deep dive for a future community meeting. We're a bit away from that. So what's important on the next slide is there's a lot of stakeholders here. The town of Lexington has multiple boards, departments, committees, school staff, but most importantly, we think as a community. The only successful projects have community support. And so again, we're here to understand what's important to you all and try and address those as best we can.
Thanks, Mike. I think Dr. Hackett did a great job of introducing who the MSBA is and their program and the application process. It is a grant program, which begins with the SOI. And so the Mass School Building Authority, MSBA, they're essentially a quasi independent government agency. So they are your funding partner, but at their core, and you'll hear us say this time and time again, as the OPM, we're here to partner with the town and to usher you through the MSBA process. But the MSBA's goal really is to find affordable, sustainable, and energy efficient solutions for schools across Massachusetts. And they're trying to find the most fiscally responsible and educationally appropriate solution. Next slide, please. So that's a little bit about who the MSBA is and their program. Having been an OPM and an architect working on K-12 schools in Massachusetts for about 15 years or so, I have to think back then before I really knew who the MSBA was and helping to understand and help to explain who they are. And I think it's really important to have that perspective as we go through the process and where their grant funds come from. The MSBA has a dedicated revenue source of 1% of the annual sales tax collections. So I think as we begin to explain who the MSBA is and their process, and certainly as we try to apply some of their programs and their process later on tonight and through the over the course of the project, it's helpful to understand that this is something that as taxpayers we're all paying into since they were founded and rebranded as the MSBA back in 2007. So the 1 penny of every dollar of sales tax collections goes into the grant funds that the MSBA helps to turn, as Dr. Hackett mentioned, is a need-based program. They work very, very hard to try to spread that money that's available on an annual basis to as many towns and districts as possible, and it's an uphill battle because there's a lot of towns that are in need. Over the course of, as I mentioned, since 2007, when they reformed as the Mass School Building Authority, they've been fortunate enough to issue over $16 billion in grant funds across the state. A big key component of their program is understanding how they determine their level of support. It is written into Massachusetts general laws that it's a formula-based system. But essentially every district in town begins with a base reimbursement rate of 31%. And you'll note that it is of eligible project costs, and we'll get into a little bit more about what that means in later in the presentation and of course over the duration of the project. But essentially the base reimbursement rate of 31% is then modified and adjusted upwards depending on these three factors listed at the bottom. And so it's really a need base. So they're trying to put all the districts and towns on a level playing field to determine how much and where those funds are distributed on a year-to-year basis. So a question we often get partnering with clients and projects, we know Lexington has been through the process before, but certainly a question we get often is, what is our reimbursement rate going to be? And it's a tough question to answer, especially this early on the process. While we are currently under a feasibility study agreement, which sets that reimbursement rate, it's really only scratching the surface over what the project will be over its entire duration. But for instance, again, the 31% of base reimbursement is there is an opportunity to be adjusted upwards, but in our case, 31% is the base reimbursement rate. And once we go through the program, there's opportunities to, again, adjust that upwards for certain incentive points, which include sustainability, and a maintenance program, which is documenting the town's maintenance program and how they intend to maintain their existing buildings and the buildings in the future. So that's out of a possible 2 percentage points, we estimate it's at 1.8%. And excuse me, the sustainability goals and incentives are constantly changing. It's recently changed as recent as this summer at the MSBA. And since it's changed over the course of the project through the construction phase, the project will be eligible for up to an additional 4% reimbursement for sustainability incentives. So we're estimating at this point roughly that the agreed upon reimbursement rate with the MSBA will be 36.8%. Of course, as I mentioned, it depends on a lot of different factors, but for the curious minds, we know there's going to be changes. We know there's a lot of, we're just scratching the surface and there's a lot of things to be determined, but this is where we're going to start as we stand. Next slide. So you probably noticed on the previous slide that there was in parentheses, a comment about eligible costs. And part of the explanation and in my explanation of explaining where the MSBA gets their money and how they try to distribute that really comes down to providing that to as many districts and towns as possible. And they determine that based on eligible project costs. They use a total project budget spreadsheet essentially, which is a line by line detail of all project expenses. And they have a very long list of policies and how each of those lines each of those expenses in those lines get applied to what's determined as eligible or ineligible. At the core of the MSBA, we mentioned that their priority is determining the most financially and educationally appropriate solutions. And so they really want to make sure that the target of the funds that are available are spent towards educational use. And so that's what they really mean by eligible. It's trying to separate and target the educational priority spaces and determine those as eligible. Of course, we're just scratching the surface. I don't expect you to understand the full program or their policies, just that we're here as your advocate on behalf of the town to help determine how these policies get applied and to help the decision-making process along as it relates to what's eligible and ineligible in determining the project cost at the end of the day. Mike mentioned that we've been fortunate to have worked with the town of Lexington in the past with the Mariah Hastings Elementary School. And so as an example, at the onset of the project, the agreed upon reimbursement rate with the MSBA at the time was 35.79%. But after the application of all the policies and funding caps along each of those budget line items, we like to refer to the actual or effective reimbursement at the end of the project after those policies have been applied. And in the case of Mariah Hastings, that came out to be about 25%. And so we just like to set that expectation up front because we know it's very easy to do some back of the envelope math and determining once numbers start flying around what the taxpayer, what the local share will be. And we just caution to get ahead of ourselves before we've had an opportunity to apply those policies and advise you responsibly. And lastly, the policies are always changing. So while the 25% Effective reimbursement on Mariah Hastings down from roughly 36 was the case a couple of years ago. In the effort of the state to continually spread money around, and in the face of inflation, that's becoming harder and harder to do. So we are seeing that trend down a little bit. So that's a little bit about the MSBA, who they are and how they determine need.
So now we're just going to walk you through a little bit of the MSBA process. The MSBA does everything in modules. As you can see, there's 9 modules on the screen. Module 1 was eligibility. That was the period in which Julie spoke about. We are currently in module 2, which is forming the project team. That red line at the top indicates where we are in the process. So we're halfway there. We're going to complete this process with getting a designer on board, and we expect that to be at the beginning of October. The next phase, once the project team is formed, is the feasibility phase. And there's 2 very important submissions to the MSBA. There's a preliminary design program, PDP, and there's a preferred schematic report, PSR. The first of the 2, the MSBA has challenged us to study minimum 3 options. They want us to look at a renovation, they want us to look at an add renovation, and they want us to look at new. Now, there's going to be multiple variations of each of those, but those are the bare minimum 3 that we are required to look at per the MSBA program. So what the PDP is going to do is it's going to tell us, okay, here are your options, right? And eventually we're going to come back and present those to you and ask you for your feedback on all of them. Once we get through that, the PSR or preferred schematic report, that's when we're going to pick our one. We have to choose from the multiple options, and there could be 3, there could be 25. We're going to have to get the designer on board and figure that out. But the PSR is when we pick our horse. That's the one option that we're going to go with. Once the MSBA board approves that, we're off to schematic design, where you take that one option and you get it to a level of design that's adequate enough to get a very accurate cost estimate. Because at the end of schematic design, even though we're only about 50% of the way through design, this is where we make our deal with the MSBA. This is what the grant amount is set on. So having a very accurate and thought out design package is very crucial. And then we go into module 5, which is local actions and approvals. That's the town funding process. And for the money that's already been appropriated, that's basically what we've signed up for at this point. Module 2, 3, 4, and 5. And then we kind of stop and ask for the community support. And if it's successful, then you move forward. And I'm going to focus on 2 through 5 tonight because that's the phase that we're in, but I'll just explain the others very briefly. After MSBA and town approve, we go into detailed design where basically we're finishing the documents. And in this case, it could be 1 to 2 years. Again, we're going to need to get the designer on board to understand that. And then construction, which again, based on those 3 options we need to look at, it could range from 2 years to 5 years. And so once you're complete with a project, there's the closeout phase, which is where we submit all our paperwork and we get the final reimbursement. And then there's post-occupancy evaluations, which is where the MSBA comes back 3 years after we turn it over and they basically say, how's it going? How's it running? And so forth. So time-wise, the green line at the bottom, that initial phase, the feasibility study phase, as I said, our initial thoughts are we think it's going to be around 2 years. And so we don't really project schedule-wise much further from that because number one, we don't know which option we're going to need or build. And so there's a wide range of options here. And so tonight we're just going to focus on modules 2 through 5. So this next slide takes those deliverables that I just spoke about. And so, we have the forming the team, which is the top box, and then the feasibility phase. And again, we need the designer input, but these are some of our initial thoughts having worked with this community before. We figure roughly 8 months for the preliminary design program, could be 10 months for preferred schematic report. And the only reason I think it might be a little bit, around that long is because all of that consensus building that I spoke about, it's going to take a lot of community input. And I think it's going to take a little bit of extra time. It can be done faster, but that's just at this point, my best guess. And then after that, probably about 10 months for schematic design. So that So that brings us to the end of 2025, this initial phase. And so there's been some preliminary discussions with town leadership. We believe that this is going to require a town-wide debt exclusion vote. And I believe in the past that has happened after a town meeting. And so that's what we're projecting. We think the timing of that will be late 2025, November, December timeframe. And so that's a look at the next 2 years, basically. At the bottom, we've just shown community meetings. You'll see 4 there. That doesn't mean we're going to stop after 4. It just would make the slide too small to read. What we're trying to show you is that we'd like to speak with you guys every 2 to 3 months and keep you abreast of what's happening with the project. Next slide, please. I talked about getting the designer on board. As I said, we have begun that procurement process and we're actually towards the end. I'm just going to skip down to September 12th. So this week we had an initial discussion with the MSBA's designer selection panel, DSP. It's a 18-member panel, which the town gets 3 representatives and the rest are all designees of the MSBA. We went in there and we reviewed 6 proposals, and on the next slide, I can show you the name of the design firms. We received 6 very good proposals. After the deliberation of the designer selection panel, 3 were shortlisted. Those 3 include HMFH Architects, Perkins and Will, and SMMA. And so on October 3rd, we will be going back and having an interview with all 3 of those to try and find the designer that we feel fits best with this community. So we're very much looking forward to completing Module 2, looking forward to getting them on board and start getting to work. So some upcoming meeting dates. I'm not going to talk through all the SBC meetings. Basically, we're meeting once every month. It's usually around the 3rd Thursday of each month. They're all posted if people would like to join. But the 4 community meetings I spoke about. So here we are on September 14th. We'd like to come back and see you in November. At this time, we'll have the designer on board. We'll have some initial discussions about their work plan, which is essentially a schedule. And so we hope to update that timeline slide and have a little bit more information for you as it relates to that. Then in February, I'm hopeful that we can come back with some initial ideas and thoughts about some of those options that I spoke about, whether it's 3 or 20, we don't know yet, but we're hoping to get some initial looks that we can share and start to get the community feedback. And then we would probably come back in April, at which time we should have finalized those options, and we'll do something like a Menti and, you know, see what kind of feedback, see what people feel about each of those options. So I'm going to let Julie take it from here.
Test. There we go. We're just about to the fun part where the grown-ups like me stop talking and we turn it over to the kids. And before we get going on that, we want to have you use the Mentimeter one more time. And we want you to answer the question, what word or short phrase best describes your vision for this project? And we have about 1 minute to enter your responses. Students, you may join in as well. And for those of you who have the hard copy, feel free to write those in. On the back of your sheet, where there are colored boxes on the back, you should be able to see a place where you can answer this question. Go.
Just to describe what's happening in the background. There's a set of algorithms that's identifying similar words in responses, and the size of the word is related to how frequently that word appears in the responses that we're getting.
So just so folks know, there's about 120 people online that are, I don't know if they're all participating, but I'm just letting you know there's about 120 people watching remotely.
And also, if you look in the bottom right-hand corner, you can see the answers being recorded by number. Jason, do you want to respond to that? Submits are not working.
Yeah, I'm not certain why that's happening. You could try refreshing. Right, but clearly voting isn't closed. I don't know. I don't know why some folks are getting that and some folks aren't getting that. We've not seen that before.
And perhaps is he on the last question, maybe? Huh. Is that consistent for everybody or some people?
It's okay. We know that this could go on for quite a while.
So would you like me to continue?
It's wonderful how many responses we're getting, but in the interest of time, let's move on to the next activity.
Very good. This is the fun part then. So we're recording up to 359 responses right now. And we are going to give you more chance for input now with our students who are from the middle schools and high schools, and they're going to lead you in an activity. Before I turn it over to the students, I just want to acknowledge our two high school leaders, very important people, especially to this project, Mr. Andrew Baker and Mr. Dan Melia. Okay, students, you're ready? You practiced, you've got this. Here you go.
Hi, everyone. I'm Nidhi, and I'm a student at the Lexington High School.
I'm Itamar, and I'm also at the high school.
I'm Paige, and I'm a middle schooler from Clark.
I'm Sanjana, and I'm a middle schooler from Diamond.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth. I'm from the high school.
Hi, I'm Izzy. I'm from Clark.
Hi, I'm Ritvik. I'm a middle schooler at Diamond Middle School.
Thank you so much for joining us in this exciting journey. During this time, it's really important that we organize and synthesize everybody's opinions and feedback. To do this, we have a system called KLDI, which some of you might remember from the strategic plan. This is an acronym where each letter corresponds to a verb. For K, we have keep, things that we want to keep from the old school to the new. For L, we have lose, things we want to end and don't want in the new school. For D, we have dream, which is basically things we want to expand from the old school into the new. And for I, it's innovate, things that we don't have in the old school, but we want to see starting in the new school.
Yeah, so as Elizabeth mentioned, we're going to get started with the first part of that acronym of KLDI, which essentially means keep. And what we mean by that is what definitely love about LHS that you'd love for us to continue having once we start thinking about what we want for the new LHS. So I know for me personally, one of the things that I love about the high school is sort of the ability to have flexibility in lunch eating spaces. I know that we have multiple outdoor seating options as well as indoor spaces as alternatives to sort of the overcrowded cafeteria. And that's one thing that I would love to have because I know that that always is sort of a nice part of my day to have. But yeah.
Something that I personally like is that in between classes, you're going like through the quad, which is like an open area between all the four or five buildings for your different classes. And I just enjoy getting that fresh breath of air after, dividing the polynomials and doing your English work and just being able to just calm yourself with like the fresh air.
Yeah, so now that we've shared what we want to keep in LHS, we want to hear from you as well. We want to hear what you want to keep and what do you love about LHS that you hope never changes. So using either the Mentimeter or your piece of paper, if you all just want to, we're going to give you about a minute. If you just want to fill that out, what you feel like.
Okay, this is the L and the KODI. What are things you would like to lose? What are those things about LHS that just drives you crazy? And what I've heard from my friends here are the hallway situation, how time consuming it is, and how it's like too much, and that's not a big enough space and not enough time to get to class, and it's kind of really distracting.
Have you ever tried to learn in a sweltering hot environment? I'm sure the concept of your children coming home from school and complaining about the atrocious heat is not foreign to you. Last week we had some 90-something degree weather, and the lack of AC did not help. So what we would like to lose is the heat.
Now, what are your thoughts? What are those things about LHS that drive you crazy? Things that you wish didn't exist and things that you don't want us to do for the new school?
Somehow this list is always longer than the previous list.
Overcrowded. Multiple buildings, seats for lunch.
Now for things that we dream about. Personally, for me, something that I learned going into high school is that mental health is an extremely important part of your student life and personal life. At LHS, we have this space called the Rock Room, which is a room with rocks with affirmations such as "you are enough," tea, comfy couches, and very nice lighting for students when they need to take a break or just maybe stop by and grab some tea with a friend. I think it's very important that we instill an environment where students know that taking breaks during their learning actually makes them more productive as opposed to slowing them down. I dream of seeing places like the Rock Room all throughout LHS's new campus. Currently, we have one Rock Room and 2,400 students. So it would be lovely if we could have this throughout all of our new campus.
Many people in my generation don't identify with the binary of male and female, and that can be really hard because a lot of the bathrooms are split into boy and girl, and there's only one or two gender neutral bathrooms throughout each building. And so either there's a long line or you have to walk across the whole building just to go to the bathroom. So something I would want is just more gender neutral bathrooms and bathrooms in general.
Now it's your turn. Please tell us what you dream about, things that you want to see expanded in the new school from the old.
Now let's move on to innovate. What are some things that have never been done before? What are some things that have never been done before that we want to incorporate in this new school? Let's think outside of the box. So, for example, have you ever been bored in a class just staring at that one slideshow, looking at the clock? 19 more minutes, 18 more minutes. When will this class end? Well, one thing we can innovate in our new LHS is having flexibility during our week. Let's say during like a science class or an English class, we can go once a week outside and learn. We can do so many things with our learning that will help us collaborate together and make this environment a safe and better place for everyone to learn. Thank you.
Sustainability is a huge push in Lexington as a whole, and we want to continue that legacy with our new building as well. That could be including things like green roofs, solar panels, sustainable heating and cooling. We want to preserve our beautiful town and school for future generations.
Now it's your turn. What do you think we should innovate in our new Lexington High School?
We could watch this all day. Petting zoo is by far the most innovative idea I've heard in a long time. This is cool. These students are amazing. Let's give them a huge round of applause. And I'll just give you a quick introduction to what the next steps are here. And what the students will do is take all of your data from Mentimeter, and then they will analyze it for trends. And when they analyze it for trends, they'll include it into a formal report with charts and graphs and all that good stuff, which they will submit to the school building committee and present. And then once we do that, and we get clearance from the school building committee, we will come back to you in community forum number 2. We will present the data to you. The students will present the data to you. And then we'll give you a chance to use Mentimeter again to prioritize those trends that we're seeing, which will land in, by the way, the actual educational plan that we'll submit to the architect. So all of these voices are going to be incorporated into the work that we will do in some kind of way. And we're really grateful to all of you for your input. So round of applause for everyone.
Yeah, so we were curious. This is sort of, it's our turn to get graded. We asked you kind of what you knew at the beginning, and we wanted to see if we moved the needle at all. Looks like a little bit, so I'll take that as a positive. But again, you know, I think that this Menti tool is very interesting, and I think I can't wait to hear the analytical review from the students on what you think. So thank you guys for doing that. So I think now we've sort of come to the end of the presentation, and we'd like to open it up to Q&A. Just some rules for the road. To be respectful of people's time, we would hope that people could keep it to about 3 minutes or less. Per usual, if you could state your name and address and ask your question or comment. We have 3 microphones set up for public comment. I believe the gentleman's turning them on right now. Any other rules of the road? Oh, yes. And for those people on Zoom, simply raise your hand and we will promote you. Also, while we're having folks come up, I'll let you speak in one moment. As you know, we do have SBC members here, other town members and ourselves. Anything, we'll try our best to answer tonight. Anything we can't, but certainly something that we'll bring back when we see you in November. Please.
Great. Dan Miller, 42 Baskin Road. I'm just curious to know if you've ever worked on any school projects that are outside the MSBA process. And if so, what are some of the regrets about working inside that system, whether it's schedule or other sorts of constraints?
So I think what I heard is, have I done non-MSBA work? And the answer is yes. And I think you're asking, what are some of the drawbacks?
Sure.
Yeah. So, there's pros and cons. Obviously the big pro is that you're getting reimbursement from the state. When you go it on your own, it's 100% on the taxpayer. The MSBA does have a very linear process, as we talked about with the modules. So it does add some time. The design phase can take a little bit longer because of these MSBA submissions that I spoke about. There's time that you submit it, and then there's a certain duration that you wait. And so not that anybody goes home and stops working. It adds a little bit of time. Is it a significant amount? It depends on the size of the project, I would say, but it does add time.
Can you try to be quantitative?
It-
A project like this,
If you had let's say, on a project like this, let's say we had let's call it a 3-year design phase with the MSBA. On a private job, you could probably do it in, 2.5 or a little bit less.
and does it drive the actual design and some of the choices made by the town to choose things that they may have not otherwise chosen?
Yeah, I think so. So the MSBA does really want to hear what you think. Part of these submissions, they want to know exactly what we're doing and how we're engaging the community. So they understand that. So that's one good thing they do. I have had some non-MSBA projects where it kind of gets pushed through the community, and there isn't a lot of that because it's not a requirement. So that is one pro that I see out of it.
But the MSBA review itself does not impose constraints to your assessment, or does not make the community make certain choices in order to appease, say, the MSBA process.
No, the only thing that the MSBA makes us do is look at those 3 minimum options, as I discussed. They want to see a renovation, they want to see an ad reno, and they want to see a new. And the reason they do that, and I'm sure all of you would like to understand, are, well, why don't we just renovate it? How much is that going to cost? Or why don't we just add on a couple of classrooms? Or why does it have to be new? And so by having those as side-by-side comparison, you can really start to weigh the pros and cons of each option. So that is something that is a requirement.
Thank you.
Carrie Frick, if you would like to ask your question, we'll unmute your mic.
Hello, can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, we can hear you. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Carrie Frick, 516 Concord Ave. I'm an architect, so I feel like design is pretty important for this project. And I was wondering if we're able to write a letter of support for one of the design teams under consideration.
I think you certainly could. I think we have members here right now. We could direct that to the superintendent's office if you like.
Okay, so we can write a letter in support and direct it to the superintendent's office?
Yes.
All right, great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, in Adamson, 33 Hancock Street. You mentioned that there will be options to keep existing buildings. Do you plan to do a forensic structural analysis of the existing
Yes.
buildings?
Yes. So part of that beginning preliminary design phase, PDP, the designer who's ultimately on board has to do a thorough review structurally. It's called an existing conditions report, and it's definitely includes structural review.
Thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't.
Not a
my
problem.
bad.
Hi, Taylor Singh, 40 Hancock Street. Thank you so much to Doran Whittier. I've been following along and everything seems very streamlined and organized so far, and we're so grateful. And of course, thank you to the school building committee for your time that you're putting into this. It's extremely important to our community. So one thing that you mentioned today during the school building committee meeting this afternoon is that the 3 selected or winnowed design teams might be paying attention. So should they be paying attention? Lexington takes historic preservation seriously, and it's important to have a facility that is in harmony with our town. One thing that the future design team may want to note is I don't know if it was our first high school, but previous high school, Muzzy High, has a very similar steeple to our depot building. So something that jives with Lexington is what this resident would love to see. Thank you.
Excellent comment.
Adam Smith, would you like to ask your question?
Hi, Adam Smith, 74 Paul Revere Road. My question is there an upper limit for the town's contribution to this project that you have in mind? And if so, what is it? And excuse me, and how did you arrive at that number?
You want to touch on this, Mike, or I'll add on to it?
Oh, I'm sorry. Did you not get me there?
No, we heard you. There's a Mike Cronin, Director of Public Facilities, is going to speak to that for a second.
Thank you for the question. So we haven't yet established an upper limit of what the construction is. I think what Mr. Burton said earlier was that we will go through the process of evaluating 3 separate options. And those 3 separate options will also have 3 separate dollar values associated with them. Once we're able to determine what the right project is, we'll be able to identify what the cost projections will be, and therefore establishing what the town's upper limit will be. But we have not preset that limit yet. Does that help?
Well, it would seem to me that if you're designing, for whatever it is that you're doing, part of what you need to do is make some trade-offs with respect to whether you're renovating or adding on or doing something new in terms of the budget and what people want to spend. We had an issue with the police station where it got very expensive, about 2.5 times what was initially projected. And we came, essentially at town meeting, it was like take it or leave it, and something that should not have been controversial. New police station, we all knew we needed one, became one because it was so expensive. And so I think part of the problem in that project was that there was no sense of an upper limit of an understanding of what the town was willing to pay. And so I'd be hoping that as you're doing this project, you're thinking about, is the town going to be willing to spend $300 million or $400 million? And I'd love to see you do that and start making those trade-offs early on so that when it comes time to approve it, because I have 3 kids who went through the system. I've been in that building plenty of times. It needs work. I understand the need for it, but not for a $600 million building or even a $400 million building. Thank you.
Thank you. Who's next?
Thank you for the informative presentation. My name is Francisco Silva at 12 Baskin Road. And my question is, when in this process can we expect to learn that the 41 Worthing parcel will not be clear cut to be used as a staging or parking area for the construction, as was mentioned in the March 2022 meeting?
Hi. So I think you're talking about the big grove of trees that's kind of on the hill.
Well, across Worthing Street.
Oh,
from the
across
dome.
Worthing.
Yes.
So we're going to evaluate the whole property that's involved in this. That piece of property over there's a little triangular space.
Yes.
It's not really that valuable from a perspective of what can we build on it or put on it. I do not expect us to clear cut it for trailers.
Okay.
So at this point, we know it's there. It's kind of a looky shape.
Yeah.
It doesn't really provide a whole lot of advantage. We don't want to have folks walking back and forth across Worthing Ave as part of the operations.
So we are learning today that it will not be used clear cut and used for staging and parking.
So you said that. What I'll say is I don't anticipate that being out of the project.
Okay.
Also wet.
You say it's wet?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Do you want to go ahead?
Sure. My name is Sandra Janes. I'm at 34 Baker Ave. Full disclosure, I'm also an architect. I think earlier in the presentation, you said something along the lines of, and excuse me if I'm misquoting you, but that you're going to select a designer who reflects the community. And I guess I'm wondering how the community is being represented in this process and what criteria you're using for the selection of the designer. Just quite obviously, I think that the selection of the designer is critical to this process, and that they're the ones who are going to carry out the hopes, dreams, everything that's been discussed tonight. So it's so critical that the selection is made wisely.
Couldn't agree anymore. You know, I was happy with the 6 that we received, the 6 proposals. Any one of them could do it. We did have a set criteria that we felt was important for this particular community. You know, number one, MSBA experience, somebody who's been down that road, who's seen that movie before, is hugely important. The 3 that we've shortlisted certainly comply to that. We know as a community, sustainability is a big part of this community. And so having a clear track record of those types of projects, showing that they can do it, working with red list free material projects, all sorts of things. We had several different criteria, and when we sat with the DSP, Dr. Hackett and Mike Cronin spoke very eloquently, representing the town. As I said, the town has 3 seats on an 18-member committee, and ultimately based on sort of what they advocated for, we were very happy with the 3 that were shortlisted. Of those 3, literally any one of them can do it, and what it's going to come down to us is going to be capacity. We care about the capacity of not just the firm, but the employees. We don't want an employee who's working on 6 jobs and is only committed 10% to our project. That's not going to cut it here. We also don't want a firm that has, for example, 2 other high schools in production, right? So we're looking at capacity, the experience of the team, the MSBA experience, all of those things, and the representation of the community ultimately landed with Mike and Julie.
Is there a public record of what was presented?
I believe all the MSBA DSP meetings are public.
Recorded? Okay. I
Yeah.
did think it would be helpful for the community to know how we were represented in the decision.
I'm going to let Jason answer that. Where do they? Sorry to put you on the spot. It's an MS. So we probably should have mentioned it in the presentation. People always have a lot of questions about MSBA. They do have a very robust website with a ton of information on it. And if you go to the Mass School Building Authority's website, type in DSP meetings, that's how you can find it.
Okay, thank you.
And I'll just add, if you want to reach out to the superintendent's office, you can do that, or look on our website. We can put more information there as well about process.
Yeah, if you can't
Thank
find
you.
it, use the contact link and we'll help you.
Great.
Sir?
Thank you. My name's Edward Edelman. I live at 49 Porta Pond. And as a trend, I'm also an architect. So you've got them all tonight. I had two quick comments. First of all, very impressed with the list, with the 6. To get that kind of response for this project, I think will be very good for the town. I think Lexington is known. I'm also on the Historic Districts Commission, so clearly historic architecture is very much part of Lexington, but so is contemporary architecture. And I hope that ultimately the design that's presented and approved is something that really reflects the best of where we are in the future. My question, is there a public document that is sort of the statement of need? Our kids did not go to Lexington High School. So in terms of like the problems with the building and the issues that are attempted to be, is there a place that mere mortals can find that?
Absolutely. Aiden, correct me if I'm wrong. Statement of interest is on our website.
Okay.
Okay.
Great.
So yeah, that's the statement of interest that Julie spoke about in the beginning. SOI, like I said, we speak in all acronyms and I apologize, but the SOI should be available. I'm going to make sure that if it's not tonight, it will be tomorrow.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We have a couple people online. Do you mind holding for 1 second? Sorry, who do we get next?
David Cantor, if you could ask your question, please.
Thank you, David Cantor from the Capital Expenditures Committee. Where in the reporting of the 3 different options that have to be identified does the matter of swing space get fully documented?
Yeah, the swing space is always a huge concern for us. Number one, as OPMs, we strive for options that don't require swing space for a lot of different reasons. The 2 of them being nobody likes learning in a trailer. We'd like to keep the students where they are until such time as we could move them. Clearly, when you're looking at renovation options, that's a little bit more hard to do. The other reason why we don't like swing space is that's, as Steve spoke about, there's several caps, things that MSBA won't pay for, and modulars are one of them. You know, honestly, if we had to build a modular high school to get this done, I don't think we got enough land to do that. So we look for ways to do it without that. Excuse me, add renovations do offer an opportunity to build new, move students into it, go back and renovate. And so there are more flexibility options there. And then, you know, with a new school option, we would look for a place on the site where we could put a new facility that meets the educational program, is what we're looking for, and doesn't impact the students at all. A fence goes up, we take half the site, a school gets built, and then they move in from the old to new. So don't know if that answers your question. Oh, timing. Steve just reminded me you were asking about when. That's going to be in the PDP phase. So all those options, you need to identify what you're doing with the students and staff. So that will be, you'll probably see some initial thoughts at our 3rd community meeting in February, and you'll probably see something a little bit more polished on the April community meeting.
If I may, a follow-up?
Sure.
What about the issue of satisfying the legislature for when we're swapping one land area for another land area that was already dictated? At what point do you anticipate you will be ready to say what that cross-matching might be?
Yeah, so I think what you're referring to, and Mike, jump in if you feel free, is it's lands on the current site that's protected by Article 97. And
Correct.
Article 97 land, once it's put into that, it's dedicated for parkland, basically. And there's sort of a hodgepodge of ownership of the site. If you look at a graphic of the entire site, some of it's school department, some of it's parks and recs, some of it's protected by Article 97. So we've begun some initial discussions to, number one, kind of survey what we got, figure out what's out there, how many square feet, acres. And then there is a lengthy process to transfer or move Article 97 land. It starts with a town meeting, 2/3 vote. And then after that, it needs to go to the Massachusetts legislation. And that piece right there could take about a year. The town certainly needs to be involved. The issue is we sort of need to know which option we're going to do. We need to know if it's a new building, how big is it? How much land do we need? So unfortunately, we don't have everything we need to know right now, but we will. And so Mike has been working with the town manager to start mapping this all out in a timeline. And that is something that we do want to speak more about in future meetings.
Thank you.
And Mike, if we could just take one more from.
We're going to do one more from the.
Tina McBride, if you could ask your question.
Hi, Tina McBride, Precinct 7 Town Meeting Member. I attended LHS. I work there now, and so I'm there every day, and I'm very familiar with all of the love-hate features and aspects of LHS. I see this as an amazing opportunity to show our commitment to learning and education that we have a history of in Lexington, but also to sustainability. I'm all for the add renovation option. I've been seeing some fantastic examples of this at Syracuse University, the Bronx in New York, and other examples that take seriously the effects of embedded and embodied carbon. And I would love to see that as a real consideration for the future of our students and all of our futures. Thank you.
Yep, and just to let you know, just last night, we had a meeting with Permanent Building Committee, School Building Committee, and Sustainable Lexington. And, you know, I'd say Lexington is one of the more progressive places I've worked. Some key decisions were actually made before we even have the designer on. For example, we've selected our goal, energy use, EUI. We've talked about a goal of net zero. We've talked about goals for what sort of certification we need to strive for. And so as an OPM, I've never done that at this phase. And so I hope the designers are appreciative. We're kind of handing some of these key decisions to them on a plate. And so, as I said, Lexington's a very progressive community, and some of these key sustainability goals have already been set.
Okay. Gloria Bloom, 17 Loring Road. And I am not an architect, and my youngest child graduated from Lexington High 30 years ago. So I don't have a lot of current knowledge, but I believe that the MSBA had a size number of students that they selected, and it was about 2,700 something. Is that right?
I believe it's 2,400.
Well, we currently have 2,400, and this spring, our town meeting just rezoned over 200 acres of land with four-story apartment buildings. The MBTA wanted a 10% increase in housing units, but we have allowed, I would say, at least a doubling in our number of housing units. And since I would expect we'd want this school to last at least 50 years, what plans have been made for what could be an easily doubling of the number of students in the high school? Or are we going to be back with trailers in 10 years?
So it's an excellent question, and one that MSBA is also concerned about, because once we finish with this high school, they don't want to hear from Lexington for 50 years.
Mhm.
Okay, that's just how it works. So one of the requirements is during the module 1, the eligibility phase, they would have worked with the school department to go through enrollment projections. There's a series of back and forth with that. Oh, sure.
When we were working through the process that Mike was describing, they actually came in at a number of 2,200. We had a number closer to 2,800 for the ask. It might have even been 3,000 at one point. We went through different variations. We then met with them and contested the 2,200 for the very reasons that you're talking about. We talked about things like the lab program that's in the high school. We talked about housing. We did some analysis of housing. We talked about the new zoning laws and the impact as well. And we landed on 2,400. So they met us part way, which we were very happy about. And they also did some analysis and additional projections. So they think that that is the right size for the building of the future. The other thing I will mention is we've thought a lot about what happens if the unexpected happens. I mentioned the planning process with master planning early on in the conversation tonight. And the high school will be designed so that we can build on should there be additional issues in the future. But we do believe that the 50-year forecast, can't forecast 50 years, but we do believe that the building will be right sized based on the 2,400 figure.
And just to add a little bit to that, Julie touched on it. I just want to make sure that people understand it. So capacity for expansion has to be included in the design, okay? And so we're going to challenge the architects to say, okay, that's a great design, but what happens if we need to add 24 classrooms? Where do they go? Where does it make sense? So all of these designs need to take that into consideration because it's a concern for MSBA and all of us.
I will say that the high school had over 2,700 students in the past. And although family sizes are indeed smaller, a doubling of the number of housing units is likely to produce a lot more than a couple of hundred students. And I do hope that will be taken into account.
Thank you. Pam?
I am Abhirami Desai. I live in Concord Avenue, and I'm a process manager by profession, not an architect. Thank you. My question, and before I ask my question, I would like to first of all acknowledge and thank you for everyone's effort that has gone into coming this far. And we are excitedly looking forward for the next steps. While in the same process, I wanted to ask, what was our lessons learned from Hastings School? Because, obviously, initially MSBA approved 35% reimbursement, and then we ended up with 25%, which is the effective. So what were the reasons why we could not go that far? Have we learned any lessons that we can apply for this process?
As it relates to reimbursement?
From MSBA. Effective reimbursement was about 25% for Hastings schools, right?
Yeah, I don't know that I would call it lessons learned. I think it's understanding what MSBA will and will not pay for. And so I gave an example of modulars, right? That's categorically no. If we said we wanted a pool, no. So there's certain things that they won't reimburse. If the educational program says we need X number of classrooms and we want 10 more, they won't pay for it. So there's a multiple of different factors. The biggest cap that is imposed is the construction cost per square foot, where their maximum cap is $393. Okay, that's the one that has the biggest impact. That and site work, I would say, are probably the two biggest. There's also caps on FF&E and technology. So it's not so much what we've learned, it's trying to understand where those caps are and trying to maximize our reimbursement. And one way to do that is through the educational program, right? I'm sure Julie has a fantastic educational program, but the reason Jason's here is because he's going to kind of work with us and be an advocate for the owner as the designer comes on board and comes to that educational program. So that's a tool that we can use to maximize reimbursement. We've had some success with that. We're going to work with a designer and offer some coaching on that. So we understand the rules of the road, and we're going to do everything we can to play within the rules of their game.
And thank you for educating me on that. Where is that exact list of what is approved and what cannot be approved? Like, for example, swimming pool is not something MSBA approves, right? So where can we find that list, a comprehensive list, if you will?
There is a page on the MSBA website that
On
discusses
MSBA.
eligible and ineligible costs. You may be dissatisfied with it because it's sort of in broad strokes as Mike was just describing, but there is some information about that. And then on a separate page on the MSBA website, there's a lot of historical cost data. And so you can look at, this was the total project cost, this was the baseline reimbursement, this is what the maximum grant the MSBA provided, and you can sort of see what that delta is between the base reimbursement rate and the net effective reimbursement rates. And all that information exists on the capital construction data page of the MSBA website.
Thank you.
And also, it's funny that you mentioned that, because we actually did have a slide that broke down the caps that we decided to take off for tonight. We decided we would bring it up at the next one, but excellent questions.
I guess I jinxed it then, sorry.
Oh, sorry, Steve has one more thing.
I was just going to chime in and make a distinction. Not that the question was asking this, but where my head went to maybe other people's minds may have went in hearing that question is that the agreed upon reimbursement rate is not an upper target. In other words, if we do everything correct and get every cent of reimbursement, we will never hit that target. So when you see the active or effective reimbursement, actual reimbursement in comparison to that, it's not like there was lessons learned where there was some money left on the table. It was just after all those policies are applied, that's where it ended up. And lastly, Jason mentioned there's a spot on the website about what's actually reimbursable or unreimbursable according to their policies. It's actually in a much longer form and harder to find that in the Mass School Building Authorities where it's written into the state law. And so it's actually in Massachusetts general laws, and some of their policies have changed. So it's a little harder to find or follow the bouncing ball and how those policies have changed over the past 10 years, but it is there for people that are curious.
Oh, thank you. I mean, the delta was too glaring. That's why I had to ask.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Tracy Kim Horn, 8 Anthony Road, also not an architect. But I did want to just go back to a previous question about this 50-year forecast that we were talking about. And I'm curious what steps will be taken to ensure that the changing educational needs and any new teaching models that might come up in the next 50 years are being taken into account.
So this will be the primary responsibility of a consultant that the designer will have. They serve in a similar role as myself, but obviously they'll be serving the architect rather than serving the owner's project manager. And there will be visioning activities conducted. There will be every attempt to look into the future and make the building, we'll talk about flexibility a lot, as flexible as possible. And then there are even some specific strategies if you're concerned about the enrollment capacity of this building. Mike mentioned that, you know, if you propose 10 extra classrooms, the MSBA is not going to pay for them. It's unlikely that they would say no to them, though. So if, for example, you wanted to add additional spaces or anticipate multi-use spaces or anticipate more classrooms, the MSBA is happy to hear those proposals and render an opinion about them. It's just that the community has to be prepared for the MSBA to say, yes, you can do that, but we're not going to participate in reimbursing for that particular element. So there's a little bit of a safety net available there as you go through the planning and programming process to help future-proof whatever this design solution turns out to be.
Are those educational consultants outlined in their proposals, or is that a later hire?
They are, and they typically speak at the interviews themselves. And in fact, we've advised the district and the community that that person is a really critical person. In addition to the architectural capacities, what are their educational planning and programming capacities?
Thank you very much.
Hello, I'm Dawn McKenna. I'm also a town meeting member and I live at 9 Hancock Street. I'm not an architect, but I have lived here since I was 5. I married my high school sweetheart, and so I have multiple generations of knowledge of family that have gone to school, worked at school, plus extended family. So my questions and comments, which are more than most people have asked, reflect my historical knowledge. So I just want to say that up front. So one of the things that has always been important in our previous discussions on renovating schools or building new schools has been including the staff departments to understand their needs. And I want to start by saying that I absolutely love what the students did. That very much used to be what the Lexington schools were all about, that the kids would take the lead. And I commend Julie for organizing that and making that happen. The keep, lose, dream, and especially the word innovate used to be one of the very important things in Lexington, and it's coming back thanks to Julie's leadership. But I want to know how we're going to allow the staff departments, and I see Jeff Leonard, who was great at that during his time. How are you going to allow them to be part of the process and when? And hopefully, especially include the music and the athletic departments, which sometimes get left out of that stuff.
Sure. I'm going to let Jason take this one as he is an educational planner. But what I will say high level is, as Jason said, whomever they have as their educational programmer is going to be critical to this project. And what that person is supposed to do is have a series of visioning sessions, which Jason spoke about. And a visioning session is going to happen multiple times. It's going to start, you know, at higher levels with teachers, with students. It's going to happen multiple times. And all of these, you know, we use something just like we did here with Menti to sort of gain that knowledge. And so I'll let Jason expand on that a little bit.
Thank you, Mike. I think part of the reason I'm at the table on the OPM side for this project is to help protect the district's interest in exactly this regard. You guys did an amazing job, and your voices should count, if not as much, but more than other voices. And part of what we want to evaluate for the designers who are interviewing in a couple of weeks is what their proposal is for that process. In my mind, an ideal process is not one where you get a lot of input from, even if it's a lot of people right at the beginning, and then no more input along the way, but that students, teachers, community members should all be contributing to design progress almost all the way up until you move in. And so we'll be looking for the designers to describe what that process of input is from all of these various stakeholders as soon as they come on board. And if it's not something that we think is going to work or be effective in hearing all the voices, we want to challenge them on that process and see if they can change what they do in order to hear those voices.
Maybe just to finish out the conversation on this. Hi, I'm Andrew Baker. I'm the principal at Lexington High School. So currently working.
Hi.
Hi. So I'm currently working with our Director of Secondary Education to put in place a series of staff meetings throughout the fall with departments where they're working on that educational visioning process. Julie will also be coming out to the school several times in the fall and in the spring to be talking with the faculty about the visioning process for the school. And they're all very aware that their voices are going to be important in this process. Yes, and there are discussions of field trips to other schools with the staff to see what some of the designers may have done or what some of the design features of recent schools are that we might want to integrate in the new Lexington High School.
So, and by that token, it sounds like you're handling that already, but I really hope to continue to see the students play a very active, both informative, but also a learning opportunity for them, because if they're engaged in it, it's their future or their siblings' future that they can help guide. And that has one of the things that got lost at Lexington High School was the active voice of the students. So thank you for bringing that back. And by the same token, I'll just throw out there that there is a large network of alumni out there who could also give you their perspectives and love to help you reach out to some of them. And then separately, can you put up the slide again of the 6 designers that submitted proposals and then tell us again who they were? I'm sorry, I didn't hear it all when you did.
Not a problem. So number 2, number 5, and number 6, and I'll read the names out. It's HMFH Architects, Perkins and Will, SMMA, Sims Maney McKee.
Okay, great. And then I'm going to push back at Julie, which she knows I could do respectfully. I was chairman of the Board of Selectmen when Avalon was built, about the number of students that are going to come to town. And I was in real estate for many years and owned a big real estate company in Lexington. The thing that SBA does not account for and that nobody accounts for is that if you're somebody who's single and has a Section 8 voucher and can find an apartment or housing in Lexington, you will take what should be either a studio or a 1-bedroom, and you will put multiple kids in there. And I had this conversation at the time of Avalon, and because I was chairman of the board, people said, "Oh no, you're crazy. It's not a problem." We were looking for money per person, per student, to make the town whole for the expenses for a period of time. And I asked for a tremendous amount of money. And I remember sitting in that room and everybody looking at me and saying, "You're crazy, John. We're never going to need that money." To which I said, "Okay, I'm crazy. Then you should all agree to it. There should be no problem." And guess what? We exceeded that money faster than anybody ever thought we were. So I say what we need to know from all of you and here, and as Julie knows, we have the ability in this town to make some political things happen. What do we have to do to change SBA's mind about the number of students that we need to be planning for? Because if we plan for 2,400 and we build all those units that, as you know, I was opposed to at town meeting, but they did agree to do it, we are going to find ourselves in a difficult position, maybe even before this school is built. So I want to be part of that and let us know what we need to do. And then the last thing I want to say, I know there's been a little back and forth about what the building should look like, but I'm going to give you a little antidote. And I said I've been here for a long time. So when Clark Middle School was built, my mother was at a party right after it was built. And they were talking about how ugly the building was and how it didn't fit in the character of the community. To which my mother turned around and said, "The person who designed it must have had a prison complex." And that building still looks like there was a prison complex, despite all the good efforts people have made over the years to fix it. So I do think it's important that we find a way to respect that history. And one of the things most people don't think about or notice because it's just there, when you walk in Lexington Center and you look down Muzzy Street, you see that big facade of Lexington High School. Now, I know they use the other side, but I do think that feeling connects the school to the 2/3 of the population that isn't in the school. And I think it's critical that we have both the design and that view from Mass Ave that you can see. Thank you very much for your patience.
Thank you.
Hi, Nora Finch, 73 Webb Street. I just wanted to say that I'm having a massive case of deja vu over this project because I lived through what the students will be living through. I spent my first 2 years at a high school that was 17 different levels, California campus, exterior hallways. We even had bathrooms that opened to the exterior. You know, courtyard on the inside, gym in a dome, you name it, it was weirdly similar, and not in the state of Massachusetts. But I spent 2 years there. They built our new school. I spent the last 2 years of high school in the new building. So with that perspective, I was very glad to hear that you're at least thinking about what would happen if the enrollment projections changed, because that building was built 10 years later, they had trailers. 20 years later, they had an addition, which thankfully they had an elementary school that had been decommissioned next door that they were able to use that space to put an addition on, but that was sheer luck. It was not planned for. And I will say, Andrew, that now the football field is named for the principal that guided us through that process. So it was a big one. But I wanted to, just ask a little bit about what you're looking at for the student experience. In my case, it was like TD Garden. We kept the auditorium from the old building to the new building. So you're talking about a chunk of the building that stayed. So the new building was coming, very, very, very close proximity to the old building. So you're dealing not just with noise, it's noise, it's dust, it's a whole bunch of stuff that the chain link fence doesn't really help with. So I'm just sort of looking for some information about that. And the second part of that is when you talk about an addition, a renovation, or a new building, are there any places in the current building that would be worth keeping? In our case, the auditorium had been built much more recently than the rest of the building. So it made sense to keep that and they could make that work with the site. I don't know if that's the case here or not. And then the last thing I wanted to say is regarding athletics. I know there's high likelihood of plowing under the existing athletic fields. I'd just like to put in a request now that we consider the transportation of those athletes to whatever fields they're going to be using, because I say from past experience that having them drive themselves to the inevitable elementary school fields and showing up when the elementary schools are being dismissed is not safe for any of the parties involved. So I just want to make sure that we're taking that into account and understanding, as I say, I'm looking more at the student experience of what they're going to live through more than anything else.
Yeah, the student experience is something that we consider. And so for Mariah Hastings, as an example, we built new next to the existing school. There was a portion of that project that was literally 10 feet away from the existing building. We put in a series of measures, sound barriers and so forth. And it's amazing what kids, as long as they know what's going to happen, can go through, knowing what's on the other end of the tunnel. And, I was there the day the kids walked in the brand new building, and it was amazing. The athletic piece, I believe, Mike and Mark do have a plan for that in place, as well as busing and transportation. And I can't remember your middle.
Oh, I was saying, if there is, when you talk about renovation, is it keeping a bit versus a whole?
It can be. And so that's part of that existing condition study where the designer is going to go through and understand everything about that building. And somebody mentioned structural. That's one of the first things they look at, because obviously we're not going to put money into a building that's not structurally sound. And that kind of takes it off the table. So that analysis is certainly done. There's also a cost benefit ratio. There's certain things that the MSBA, as I said, won't pay for. And so is it worth keeping the existing field house? Maybe, I don't know. So this is all part of some of the things that we need to evaluate as we go through this preliminary design phase.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Karen Griffiths, Dexter Road. I don't entirely have a question other than tell me if I'm wrong, but I feel the need to channel Kathleen and pontificate for a second to townspeople and parents who are listening, which is that whatever design is chosen, there are going to be a lot of people in town when we come to the debt exclusion who are saying, oh my gosh, that's too fancy, that's too big, that's too expensive. Why are we being so crazy in Lexington and doing all of the crazy stuff? And I just want to, again, correct me if I'm wrong, but one of the benefits of working with MSBA is that they have very specific guidelines of what is approved and what is necessary. And at least in, past experience with building projects in the town, we don't go crazy about what MSBA says. We sort of use their guidelines. We feel like, oh, we have to add these few other things because, it won't work otherwise. But again, it's going to be, when we get to the debt exclusion, it'll be a really big number. And people who haven't been paying attention are going to be shocked. And so I just sort of want to put out into the ether for anybody listening, so you can talk to your friends when it happens, to say, no, it seems extravagant because the current high school is so lousy. So the gap between what we have now and what sort of baseline good future looking school is humongous. So I just wanted to warn everybody that that's going to happen. Sound reasonable to you?
Does. Thank you. Do we have anybody online? Any other folks in the room? All right, well, look, like I said, really appreciate what you guys did here today. We hope to see more of your involvement. I look forward to seeing what you do with all this data that we collected here tonight. So thank you all for taking time out of your days and nights and coming here, and hope this is one of many. So thank you very much.